As Phonepay Plus starts its consultation into radically changing the way it regulates premium rate services in the UK, we talked to Suhail Bhat from MEF and Jeremy Flynn from AIME about what it means for the industry.
So from an MEF perspective, the code of practice that's been published by Phonepay Plus for consultation is actually really good. It's a real breath of fresh air. It's looking at the code, it's looking at the industry, it's looking at an outcomes-based way of regulating, it's looking at where do the harms rest. So it's looking at actually assigning responsibility for breaches of the code of practice to those parties who've actually committed that harm, rather than the current process, which is targeting the aggregators who haven't actually run the services themselves. So that's one sort of very important thing that MEF is particularly happy about in terms of a proposal. The second is a registration scheme in order to facilitate that. And the registration scheme really is about providing transparency. It's about providing transparency not just in terms of Phonepay Plus and allowing them to understand who's in the industry, but also about allowing companies to do due diligence on the companies that they are contracting with. And that's really quite important to make sure that you have companies in the industry, in the premium rate world, who are legitimate, who follow the code of practice, and who you can trust and rely on to not rip consumers off, in effect.
AIME has been arguing for 3 or more years with both Ofcom and PPP that we should require providers of premium rate services to be registered. And why do we think this is important? We believe it's important because historically, in using old language, the service provider has taken all the blame when there have been problems in premium rate, where we all know that most problems occur not with a technical provider, but with the person promoting the service. So AIME has succeeded both through the Ofcom consultation prior to this 12th code, that PPP should be required to register all parties in the premium rates industry. What this means, it's a relatively cheap process. We're anticipating it to be less than £100 a year. What this means to say is that for the first time, people cannot be in the premium rate industry and hide behind their service provider. The spotlight moves to all players in the value chain. And we don't think this is going to solve every problem, but the historic issue of people being able to hide in shell companies, behind shell companies in the British Virgin Islands and pollute the UK premium rate industry, those days are finally at an end. Linked to registration is Number Checker, and again, one of AIME's initiatives is try and ensure that the regulator only gets involved in issues as a backstop, like any other regulator. We've historically seen too many consumers being directed straight to PPP, whereas what one needs to do is direct the consumer to the merchant, the person that sold the product, and give that merchant the chance to solve any issue, which might be simply a download that's been paid for that has got lost in the phone. We don't believe some of the statistics we've seen about complaints of Phonepay Plus. We want the merchant to have the chance to resolve any issue before it becomes a complaint. It's therefore vital that we see accurate information given to consumers, and we've been working hard with Phonepay Plus to get the accuracy level up of Number Checker so that all parties that use Number Checker, including consumers, can be directed to the merchant for redress. Part of the bigger picture around the 12th code is this environment of escalating fines. And AIME in general has supported the polluter pays principle. Why should the good parts of industry pay for an expensive regulator? Surely the bad guys should be paying. However, with significantly increased fine levels, that is not quantity of fines but the value of fines last year, there needs to be very careful process, transparent process in the regulator. And we do think there are some issues that makes it difficult for people that are in front of the code compliance panel to be able to argue their case fairly. So we're very encouraged to see a commitment to use more frequently and more transparently an informal procedure, which will work a bit like the mobile operator's red card process, which is put it right in a day or take it down for a couple of days until you have corrected it for minor breaches. So we're working with Phonepay Plus for a triage system, which, just like in the hospital, will assess whether something should be done as an emergency procedure, a standard procedure, and an informed procedure. And actually, again, this is not embedded within the code specifically, but it's one of the peripheral areas. That initiative could be as significant to industry to help improve confidence in the industry than the 12th code itself.
The Phonepay Plus Code of Practice shouldn't really just be seen in isolation. Certainly from a MEF perspective, the way we're looking at this is a potential blueprint for how we might be able to regulate in other territories. MEF's membership is global. The companies that operate premium rate services in the UK also operate in other countries under completely different regulatory regimes. And it's a really odd position to be in, to have to try and run services and change the way you do that in other territories. Some of the existing Phonepay Plus rules, particularly the rules around subscription services and how consumers can exit those services by using the stop command, are already replicated in other territories. And I think this particular consultation, with its fresh approach to having that transparency, is actually something that we will leverage in other territories, particularly Brazil, India, Indonesia, Malaysia and Singapore, where we're already having discussions with regulators to try and make sure that the regulatory regime is flexible yet tough enough to protect consumers. So not everything, of course, is completely rosy in terms of the consultation. One of the fundamental issues I think that MEF and the industry need to resolve with the regulator is the actual definition of a premium rate service. That underpins almost the entire consultation. You need to know what is a premium rate service in order to understand how the code of practice might apply. And I think a really good example of that is where you purchase a game, for example, using a premium rate mechanism. That's currently regulated by Phonepay Plus. But if a company sells exactly the same game for exactly the same price, but uses a slightly different payment mechanism, let's say they buy it through an application store, it's not covered. And I think even worse still is where we're seeing companies try and provide services on multiple platforms, regardless of which platform they've actually purchased or accessed the content through. You can see more and more issues arising. Now, we already have quite a good conversation with Ofcom and Phonepay Plus, but I think as part of this consultation process, we must determine the criteria that quite clearly set out what a premium rate service is in order for it to be encapsulated in the remit of Phonepay Plus.
The interesting thing about the 12th code is actually it's not that fundamentally different than the 11th code. What it's done is to take the main part of the code that are principle-based rules and embed them in the legal code, and all the service-specific guidance to go into guidance notes. What this means is that they can change guidance notes with just industry consultation, whereas the code requires a lot more Ofcom involvement. So the 12th code itself is not that radical. What is significant about 12th code is everything that goes around it. So in conclusion, the 12th code is important, but it's only part of a much larger series of changes that AIME is working with the regulator to try and improve the environment for the PRS industry.